Okay, I'd like to welcome everyone to this week's edition of the Belonging series, which is Imperial as One's exploration into the BAME experience. Um, the exploration into the BAME experience. And this week, I'm really happy to have with us Cynthia So. And Cynthia is an author and also an EDI coordinator at Imperial College. And I know we're going to have a really fascinating discussion. So, Cynthia, my usual thing is to ask everyone to just give us um, a little bit of their background. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your childhood when you were growing up. What were some of the things which you what were some of the things which helped to develop your sense of belonging as you were growing up?
Yeah. Well, so I grew up. I was born in Hong Kong, and then when I was 11, I started boarding school here in England, and so that was quite a massive change for me, and that was something that I think really shaped like my sense of who I am and kind of like brought my life to a completely new direction, I guess. And I guess I really struggled with finding a sense of belonging at school.
So
um,
you're from Hong Kong
yeah.
and you came to boarding school in the UK. How was that transition for you? How did that make you feel?
um I think I just sort of I really wanted to. I was one of those people who really wanted to go to boarding school as a child. I had, read like Harry Potter books and books like Mallory Towers and stuff like that. And so I had kind of this vision of what boarding school would be like. Obviously, I knew it wouldn't be magical, but it was like approaching that.
Yeah.
And it was just like completely not what I expected.
Yeah.
And I think I really struggled with feeling like I was an outsider and didn't really fit in.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
So,
yeah.
so what was it that? So you said that you had this idealized kind of like viewpoint of what you thought boarding school would be like, but when you got here, you said you struggled to kind of like fit in. In what
Hmm.
sense was it that you felt that you struggled? Was there anything in particular which caused you to struggle?
Yeah, I think it was just that um, I guess I came here and then sort of immediately realized I was only 11, but that was when I realized I was queer. I realized I was bi.
Mhm.
And it and it was school was a very sort of casually homophobic environment.
Mhm.
People would just make casual homophobic comments a lot of the time.
Mhm.
And I also felt like I guess like I was, from Hong Kong, and at that time I still had a bit of an accent.
Right.
Um, and yeah, so it was all just very
And so
tangled up in all of that.
yeah, I can imagine being a like a pre-teen anyhow, and then going into teenage years. You've got loads of things which you're coming to terms with. So on top of that, you had your um, sexuality beginning to manifest itself, and then also the racial identity. How did the school respond, either the students or the teachers? What was the response from them? Did you tell anyone? I suppose I should ask as well.
Yeah, I guess I never really I came out to a few friends, and I think the people I came out to were generally kind of okay with it. There were a few people who weren't, like, sort of, it was hard to tell, like, I was only 11 and
Yeah.
I wasn't sure how much people were keeping it a secret, and I was like, maybe some people know who shouldn't know about it, and it was really weird and awkward. And there were definitely people who knew who weren't okay with it and were kind
Right.
of a bit like disgusted by it.
Yeah.
And but I didn't really tell anybody. I didn't tell any teachers about it. And yeah, it was just kind of something I did have, friends who were okay with it and they were like supportive,
Yeah.
but it was hard to talk about it with them. There was just some
Right.
kind of, I was very young and I was kind of like, this is, my friends are straight and I'm not sure they really understand
Yeah.
completely what it's like. So yeah, I found it very difficult to talk about at that time, I think. But yeah, no teachers knew about it, and people were just like, casually using the word gay as an insult
Yeah.
for anything really.
Yeah.
So
So you never did anyone speak up about it? So you're saying like the environment, the culture which you were in, that it was almost deemed acceptable. Did the teachers not even say anything if they heard it whilst in?
yeah, there was only one teacher I remember who said to somebody like you shouldn't use the word gay in a derogatory way, you shouldn't use it as an insult.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like one time, and that was when I was like 16, 17.
Right.
So
Right.
it was already years of like this.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
finally there was one teacher who
Yeah.
spoke
Yeah.
up and said something.
Yeah.
But I remember that being really important to me. I was like, wow, like a teacher actually said this.
Yeah.
Like I wish all the teachers would say this.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
So I'm just before we move on, I'm just thinking. So how did you cope? How did you cope with all of what was going on? What was your solace? Where did you get the security to be comfortable with? Were you comfortable with your identity at that moment in time, or was it a struggle? I don't know.
Yeah, I think I didn't want to be different than I was. Like I was like, this is who I am.
Hmm.
But I knew that it was difficult in that environment. But I was like, I don't want to change who I am.
Hmm.
Eventually, there'll be better environments where I can be who I am.
Yeah.
And I never want to change who I am. So I was accepting of myself, but kind of it was still a very difficult thing. And I was like, I think at school particularly, I spent all the time being like, I was brave enough to come out to everybody or
Yeah.
brave enough to come out to my mom but it was just like, I can't do it. Like, I just couldn't, I didn't
Hmm.
have it in me.
Hmm.
And, I don't think it's a bad thing that I didn't come out
Yeah.
generally
Yeah.
then. Um, but at that time, that was something that I was like really sort of sad about, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand that. I'm just trying to get into my psyche or into my head as to kind of like there you were maybe struggling, but who was there to help you kind of like just to support you through all of that
Yeah.
because it's
I
a lot to go
guess.
through.
Yeah, exactly. But I did have, I had the internet, which is something that
Hmm.
I'm really grateful for. And it is really, I think it is much easier growing up with the internet than
Hmm.
without it if you
Hmm.
are queer, because it is much easier to find other people who are queer and just to know that they exist out there somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I was just reading a lot of like queer websites,
Hmm.
and I had queer friends on the internet that I could
Hmm.
talk to about it.
Hmm.
So that was kind of, the thing I really leaned on. And um, I also like since a young age I've really loved writing. So I was also writing things about it. I was writing, an angsty diary. I was
Yeah.
writing stories. I was trying to write books.
Yeah.
Not very good books, but I tried. But yeah, so that was all kind of how I processed everything.
Okay, so from an early, because it goes back to what you said in terms of like your passion for boarding school came from your love of literature and Harry Potter and Mallory Towers and stuff like that. So for you, it was an alternative way of expressing yourself by
Yeah.
putting something down on the page. That's excellent. So
Yeah.
what about when you went to university then? So you were at school where it was a kind of like a, I'm not going to say homophobic, but casual homophobia seemed to be prevalent within
Mm.
the school system. What about when you went to university? How was that? Did it change? Was it the same?
It was very different when I got to university. I think I kind of, yeah, I put a lot of dreams and hopes into what university would be, and I think it was, yeah, it was at least a relief for me to get to university and realize that people weren't like making these casual homophobic comments anymore, and I didn't hear the word gay being thrown around as an insult anymore. And I was still very nervous to come out for the first few months, but then I did come, I like went to some events at the LGBTQ society,
Mm-hmm.
um, and I sort of, at those events I was obviously like, I am queer, I'm
Yeah.
bi, but then like within sort of like just people in my course who didn't know about it, I was like, I'm not sure how to tell them. Should I tell them? I really want to tell them. But anyway, so I did come out to somebody, and then the first person I came out to, I was like, oh, I'm bi. And they were like, oh, I'm also bi. And I was like, oh my God, this is the most incredible day of my life. But yeah, so it was good. Once that happened, I was like, actually it's fine. Like
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
do have like people who know about it who are also queer,
Yeah.
and then I was just kind of like, I can come out to people at university. It's no big deal. And it was
So
great.
so it was quite a different experience then, a more liberating experience when you got to university, slightly older, and more having more self-confidence.
Yeah.
Would you say you had more self-confidence when you got into university to be able to discuss these issues?
I think so, but I also think I don't really know. I think it was just a combination of like the people I was surrounded with that like were all extremely supportive and like very happy to just talk about it, like without like it's very simple. Like I feel like at school, even my friends who knew about it, they
Yeah.
would never bring it up of
Right.
their own accord because I
Right.
don't know whether it just like they weren't too sure how to talk about it,
Yeah.
or but like at uni, like people were perfectly happy to talk about it just as you would like just to ask, about like any girls I had a crush on,
Yeah.
just like that
Yeah.
kind of thing,
Yeah.
very casually, and it was
Yeah.
fine. So I think it was just like, yeah, having those very supportive people around me, being able to go to LGBTQ society events,
Mhm.
and just like being surrounded by queer people in a room, which I'd never had that experience before.
Yeah.
Um, it was just on the internet before. So yeah, so I guess just having those experiences made it a lot easier for me to feel like I belonged.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
no, that makes sense. So it was one thing having the internet, which was supportive, but it's a different kind of supporting mechanism compared to that physical interaction with other people who are accepting of you.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. So, in terms of how would you say that that's influenced the way that you see yourself? The experience of university especially, because it seems like that was kind of like a quite a pivotal point for you.
Yeah, definitely. I think it really reinforced, like, I guess throughout school, I knew I was queer. I also, I really cared about it. Like I was reading about, on these queer websites and stuff about um these issues and like, queer LGBTQ rights in the news and stuff like that. And then I got to university and I could actually like be involved. I was like on the committee of the LGBTQ campaign at the student union.
Yeah.
Um, I I was like I was also the BME officer at my college.
Right.
And like those were things that I really cared about, and like I could do something about it, and like
Yeah.
be surrounded by like-minded people. And I guess that kind of shaped my, like I was like, I do really care about equality and diversity,
Yeah.
and like I'm really glad that like it's led me along this path where I am now, like working in the
Yeah.
equality and diversity field,
Yeah.
in the EDI Center. Yeah, so
So
that's really been great.
So how would you want? I'm just thinking, how would you want to? How did that influence, or how has that influenced what you do now in terms of having gone through the experience, or you're going through various experiences? What is it that drives you in your current position as a EDI coordinator, and the kind of activities which you're pushing to accomplish?
Yeah. I guess it's just like I I know that like I want to do something that I really care about. Like I
Mhm.
have been, I have been a management trainee. I have worked in different areas in the college, but like I think ultimately I was always like, I really care about equality and diversity. I really want to do something which feels like it has an impact on people's lives, and changes people's experiences for the better. And it's something that like, as I was really immersed in that scene at university, it's something that I feel like I do have some knowledge of,
Mhm.
people's experiences. So yeah, so that's why I really wanted a job in the EDI Center. And I I work with, I've made like ally pages,
Mhm.
like last year, with the when the Black Lives Matter movement was gaining momentum, we were working on that how to be a white ally page. Like I was working on that with the team. And I also have then since made some ally pages on like how to be an LGBTQ ally, how to be a bi ally, how to be a trans and non-binary ally. So like it's like, yeah, it's definitely like, because like I kind of have these things already in my head. It's like quite easy for me to be able to put those things together. Um, and yeah, I'm working with like the staff networks, working to support staff networks, and yeah, it's still just stuff I really am enjoying and feel passionate about. Oh, sorry, Wayne, I can't hear you.
Sorry, from what you were saying, it sounds like one of the main parts, or one of the main things which you enjoy about it, is that being able to provide necessary education, resources, to make effective change. Yeah,
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 yeah, I think so. Yeah,
yeah,
and just feeling like I am having some kind of impact on people,
yeah,
because there are a lot of roles which I think definitely have an impact on people,
yeah,
but it maybe is less like obvious when you're in your day-to-day kind of work.
yeah,
But I do feel like with this I can see sort of, what I'm doing and what difference it makes.
yeah, yeah. It's a big role that you have, because it encompasses um, so many different facets where people try to make people feel othered.
Hmm.
Yeah. And how do you reverse it from feeling othered to feeling included?
Yeah.
So in terms of what what was it, I'm just trying to find the right question. What was it that helped you to find you to feel included, if that makes sense?
Yeah. Sort of, is this in general in my life
Yeah,
or?
just kind of like from the perspective you said about your not your gender identity. Well, your gender identity is something which I'd like to also look at, but
Yes.
your sexual identity,
Hmm.
the fact that you have a racial identity as well.
Yeah.
How did all of those things come to? How have they come to help to establish where you feel and how you view yourself now? Your overall identity, if that's what I'm trying to ask.
Yeah, I think it is really interesting to like look at all those identities sort of intersect and play together and become sort of the whole. Um, But yeah, so I realized I was bi when I was very young, and
Yeah.
then I guess the sort of racial identity is also interesting because like I was born in Hong Kong, and then at that point I was in the majority culture,
Yeah.
and then I moved to the UK, and I kind of realized that the race thing was an issue, and
Yeah.
that people would make fun of, like, would say think like Chinese, sort of like make Chinese sounding noises which
Yeah.
weren't Chinese and things like that. And it was, yeah, it was kind of, a, a strange thing to sort of, the racial identity was definitely something I was like, this is a problem somehow for like other people
Hmm.
here. And I wasn't too sure, sort of like, I guess the queer thing was kind of like more big in my mind. I was like, this is difficult. I need to come out to people,
Hmm.
blah, blah, blah. I need to come out to my family, maybe, that sort of thing. So it was kind of like, when I got to university, I was like, I kind of was like, I can embrace both like my queer identity and my racial identity
Hmm.
at the same time.
Hmm.
Um, so like when I was on the committee for the LGBTQ campaign, I was like the people of color rep for like LGBTQ people of color.
Yeah.
So like I cared, like sort of like had like discussions with other queer people of color about our identities and stuff. So it was something that I felt like at university, I was like, I know other queer people of color now. Like it's a
Yeah.
thing, like, you know, we can be queer and be people of color.
Yeah.
Um, Whereas, like, I think, yeah, when I was younger, I was just kind of like all these queer things I was looking at on the internet, it was very overwhelmingly white and stuff.
Right.
So, yeah, and then I kind of, after I left university, I also came to realize that that I was non-binary, which
Hmm.
again was like another added layer to that. Um, and that was really interesting, realizing that I was non-binary and coming out to people, my friends, as non-binary,
Hmm.
because when I was younger, having had that first experience of realizing I was bi, I was very scared to like. I was like, if I tell people I'm non-binary, maybe there will be a negative reaction, because it is, again, it's like, not as talked about being
Yeah.
non-binary. Um, and so I was very worried about that at first. But then when I came out to my friends, they were all like extremely supportive,
Hmm.
and they didn't they didn't like doubt or like question me. They were like, oh yeah, great. Like if you want to use they them pronouns, we'll use they them pronouns
Yeah.
for you. So it was it was an amazing experience seeing that like I had managed to surround myself with these people who were very accepting of me.
Yeah.
And I think it's just about, yeah, just people are who do like keep up their awareness of these things. Like they will read articles about like gender and race and disability and all sorts of things. And so they're like more aware of like what you should and shouldn't do. Um And I think that is very important, like to keep up if you want to be an ally, if you want to be inclusive of just like your friends who may be from different backgrounds to you, you should be actively trying to read stuff or like watch stuff or, listen to podcasts that will increase your awareness about things
Yeah.
that you don't know anything about.
Yeah.
Because there will be lots of things that you don't know anything about, and that's fine. But, you should seek to increase your awareness.
Yeah.
And there are lots and lots of resources out there for you to help you do that. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So there's one question which I haven't asked, which I'm gonna how because from what you've said about your friendship groups that
Hmm.
they became a very strong source of support for you
Yeah.
in as you were going through making the decisions, changing, etc. Um, what was the response like from your family when you came out to them?
Yeah. So I've come out to mum and my dad, but not to any of my extended family. Although I think my mum's told her sisters. I don't know. It's a bit vague, families.
Yeah, yeah.
And I came out to my mum that I told her I was bi when I was 18. And she's been, largely very supportive. She does, say some comments sometimes which are a bit like, I'm not sure you should say that, mom, but like,
Yeah,
on the whole, she is very supportive.
yeah,
And I have a girlfriend now, and my mom's great about it. Like,
yeah.
and I also sort of tried to come out to her as non-binary, but then I think she wasn't too sure of what it meant.
Yeah.
But she was like, whatever, like it's fine. I'm
Yeah,
not too sure what this means, but it's okay. um, and Also in Cantonese, we don't really have gendered pronouns in the same way as we do in English. So like it's kind of gender neutral. The pronoun that you use for people in general is just gender neutral. So it's not as big of a deal, I feel like. And my dad, I also came out to him.
mm-hmm.
So I came out to my dad by I had a short story published in anthology for like about LGBTQ sort of stories and poems for young adults, teenagers,
Right. Yeah,
essentially. And I didn't tell I didn't tell anybody in my family that this had been published. Like it had been published already. The book was out there in the world. I didn't
yeah.
tell anybody in my family about this.
Right.
I am quite a secretive person, I feel like. um, and then my dad came over because my parents are divorced, so I see my dad more infrequently, I guess.
Yeah.
But he came over to sort of like he was doing some work or something, and we had dinner, and then I brought him over to a bookshop, and I was like, "Hi, look at this book with my name on the back. Also, it's queer. It's got rainbows all over it. I'm queer." And like he was like, "Oh, this is so cool. That's great." And then he like bought like 3 copies of the book. So that was good.
That's good. That's an interesting way to come out.
Yeah.
Okay, but I suppose in terms of like, were you worried about how your parents would respond? Was that?
Yeah, I think I was definitely very worried about how my mom would respond.
Mm-hmm.
So my dad, again, my parents divorced when I was, 13, 14,
Right.
and my relationship with my dad has always been very different to my relationship with my mom,
Right.
especially since, I don't see my dad as often, and
Right.
my mom is kind of the person that, I was spending much more time with. So
Mm-hmm.
she was much more like the parental figure, whereas my
Yeah.
dad was kind of like, he's still a parent, but like more of just like a friend that I
Yeah.
would see sometimes.
Yeah.
And So he was not like strict. He never tried to like make me do anything or like, you know, whereas my mom would be like, you should do this, blah blah. And so I was very like, oh, my mom might have some things to say about it. I don't know. Like, so yeah, I spent, all my years at boarding school, all 7 years of it being like, oh, I really want to come out to my mom, but I'm really scared. I don't know what she'll say. Because I think about Chinese culture or culture in Hong Kong is that like nobody really talks about being gay or being LGBTQ.
Right.
It's very, you just don't know what people think about it because they never talk about it. And
Right.
it's
Okay.
not really on TV, it's not in the media. So you're kind of like, I have no idea what
Yeah.
any of my family thinks about these things.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, so I was very, very worried. But then my mom was like, "Oh, your cousin is gay." And I was like, "What?" And I was like, "Okay, I'm also bi." And then she was like, "Oh, okay, I always knew." And I was like, "Oh, if you always knew, maybe you could have given me some kind of sign." Okay.
That's. I'm not saying it's funny, but I understand. I understand the
Yeah.
positioning of that.
Yeah.
I'm going
It
to
was
ask
very
one
funny.
quick question before I open it up to the audience, who are with us. And the question is in relation to the fact you segued into it quite nicely in terms of when you were talking about the fact that you're a published author, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, excuse me. Give me a flavor of the kind of things which you write about and how you see using your literary abilities to make a change and an impact.
Yeah. So it's something I really, really care about, diversity in literature. And I remember, being a teenager, I really wanted to read more queer books, but there were hardly any at that point. Obviously, there was kind of like the shadow of like Section 28 hanging over us.
Mm-hmm.
So there were like not many queer books for teenagers
Mm-hmm.
in the UK, whereas it was starting to take off in the US a little bit
Mm-hmm.
more. So
Mm-hmm.
um, so I was like seeking out these books, and I was like, I really want to write my own queer books as well. So that's kind of like where I've always been coming from, is that I really want to write stories and books about queer characters.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a few published short stories, which all feature, queer people of color as the main characters, and queer love stories. And I'm sort of working on my first book, my first YA book for teenagers. And it's sort of, it's about a queer character who's from Hong Kong as well. And I just really want teenagers to like have these books that I didn't have when I was younger.
Yeah.
And that's something that's really important to me. So I will never write, a story without a queer character,
Yeah.
without a person of color in it.
Yeah.
And so that's and it's great to sort of see how that's really changed in the past few years. Because
Mm-hmm.
like I said, when I was younger, there was hardly anything.
Mm-hmm.
But there has been a real movement in the past few years to make books more diverse.
More diverse, more inclusive.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's interesting that you should say that when you were growing up there wasn't, and I remember when we had our little discussion where you said about the fact that all the characters were mainly white protagonists, and it's something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it was, all the characters were mainly white in these books that I was reading. And
Mm-hmm.
like when I was writing my own books at that point, when I was like 15 or so,
Mm-hmm.
I was only writing about white characters as well, because I think, at that point I was kind of like, because the queer thing is such at like the forefront of my mind, of like how to
Mm-hmm.
come out to people, and like the fact that I was worried that my family wouldn't be supportive of me.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like the racial identity thing is a bit more like nobody has any doubt about that. That's like
Yeah.
just like
Yeah.
who I
Yeah.
am on the
Yeah.
outside.
Yeah.
So, but then I kind of realized that it was really important that like the fact that I wasn't realizing that I wasn't writing about characters who actually looked like me, or like I realized that was very important. And so again, I feel like I definitely don't want to only write about white characters.
Yeah. You want
Yeah.
a broader spectrum.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Fantastic. I'm gonna see if there's any questions from anyone in the from the audience. Otherwise, I have got a couple more questions to go ahead with. So, is there anyone who has a question that they'd like to ask? Right. Okay. I don't see anyone in the chat. All right, Sarah. Sarah. Sarah, unmute yourself, please, Sarah. And if you could ask your question.
Trying. Hi, Cynthia.
Hi, Sarah.
It is nice to see. I've been emailing you this morning, and you're usually efficiently responding to me, and then now I know why you've had other things on your mind.
Yeah.
So, I guess the question I have, obviously, I'm been heavily involved in sort of EDI issues, and Athena has been a big thing for the last 10 years for college. And obviously all our data is about gender. And this is really, excludes people like you, I would say. And one of the things I think we are noticing now is, more students and more people even actually applying for jobs are sort of ticking the box, which is, no, I'm not going to put female or male. So how do we go with that? What's your advice to the college? And because we want to keep collecting all this data, we want to we've got the we want to be inclusive, etc. What should we be doing, I guess?
Yeah, I guess it's like I do know that we are trying to work on making some of these systems better, because the systems at the moment really aren't ideal. For example, I know that there isn't really an option to have no title on the HR system at the moment. You have to pick like, Mr., Miss, Mrs., etc. Which there is a gender neutral title like mix, but like it's not everybody wants to use it. And we are definitely trying to work on figuring out how we can change that system, but obviously our HR system is very old. And that's something we are working on, I know. But yeah, definitely we need to be making sure that our systems are friendly for non-binary people, that they are able to express themselves accurately and authentically using those systems. And again, this is something we've put on the trans and non-binary pages. We've got a pronouns page on our website, and it really does help, I think, if people do try and when doing introductions at a meeting, if people do try and say, my pronouns are they, them, or she, her, or he, him, or whatever, and encourage other people to do the same if they want to, if they feel comfortable doing it, because again, not everybody should be forced to share their pronouns. Like, it should be a choice. But yeah, that pronouns thing I think is very important, just because as somebody who uses they, them pronouns, I do feel very awkward when it's like, when pronouns hasn't been a thing in a meeting, nobody has said what my pronouns are, blah, and then somebody uses she, her pronouns for me, and I'm like, should I correct them right now when we're like in the flow of the meeting, and we're discussing some kind of, so it's very difficult if it hasn't already been established as the meeting started that this is a space where people kind of recognize that pronouns are important, for you to just jump in and start making an issue out of it. I feel like definitely I try to correct people if I can, but it's not always possible during the flow of a meeting. So yeah, look, email signatures, that kind of thing, and just recognizing using gender neutral language, like not saying men and women when you're addressing a group of people, that kind of thing, because I hear that a lot in lectures, workshops, events. The speaker will just say men and women, and then I'm like, oh, I'm not really included in that. Okay.
So what is the term? I mean, I would say
people, everybody, instead of ladies and gentlemen, just
But I think I literally came from a meeting where I was presenting the Athena data, and it is all male female, and the whole 180 pages of data, it's all male female, and you just think, actually, that we shouldn't be there at the moment. And
I guess if that's the case, you could always make sure at the beginning to be like, we know that this is what we have at the moment. We would like to work towards something different in the future, but the data we have is very binary at the moment. So what I will be presenting to you is kind of very binary, but just acknowledging that isn't that non-binary people do exist, that kind of thing would help.
But it's just the fact that you've got a whole thing in higher education which is asking you to report just on gender, and obviously there are very valid reasons for that, and you know, there were, but yeah, we're in a different point now, and so
Yeah,
yeah.
of course. Yeah.
Right.
Definitely. This is a very interesting space and it's always evolving. So yeah.
Somebody's hoovering. I'm going to mute.
That's fine. I believe there's another question as well from, excuse me, sorry. There was Sarah and there was someone else who had a question.
Mabel?
Sorry, hi. I
Yeah.
will not turn off my video because I haven't cleaned my room. I do apologize.
That's fine.
Thank you. That was a really fantastic and really interesting talk. I guess mine is a sort of question / comment. I was wondering, what's your take on how we could possibly involve intersectionality when we are sort of looking at material of how to sort of be a friend of different groups? And the reason why I ask that is, last year, I went to one of the discussions because one of my friends had just come out and I'd read quite a lot and I was really quite keen to support and say things. And she said, well, actually, my experience is quite different because I'm also Black. And so I'd come in very much thinking, okay, you just come out, so I'm coming to be a friend, to support. But she said, well, my experience is actually not what is being discussed here. So do you see any room of how we can use intersectionality when we're trying to be supporters and friends of different groups? Or do you see these as different entities?
Yeah, no, I definitely think intersectionality is crucial. And like I said, when I was at university, I was, talking to other queer people of color about it. And I think that is the thing, right? It's just knowing that these experiences are different and that your cultural or your racial background will sort of make a difference to how you see your queer LGBTQ identity. And there are definitely, resources out there, charity specific, Black Pride is a group that is kind of, very much recognizes that that queer people of color need a space. And so yeah, it's just about looking there is kind of work done out there. There are sort of, publications and spaces out there that do have the voices of queer people of color, and it is about just like listening to what their experiences are. But yeah, definitely, like, publications like Galdem, for example, they often publish pieces about the queer experience from the point of view of Black people, or that kind of thing. So yeah, I think it is crucial to be intersectional. And I am also looking at, I'm hoping we can put up some resources about being an ally to LGBTQ people of color at some point soon. That is something I'm looking at trying to work on in the future. So yeah,
Fantastic.
I hope that helps. I don't know.
We've got enough time for one more question. Medina, you've got a question?
Yeah, hi. I'm not going to turn on my video as well because
You're,
I've
bit,
just moved in and my face is a mess.
you're not very loud, Medina. Could you?
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but yeah, maybe if you try and say your question, I'll.
Yeah. Otherwise, I'll send it in the chat. I was wondering about because you said that you've kind of had different experiences at uni and now in the EDI Centre about tackling different aspects of EDI. And I was wondering what you sort of, I guess, where the balance is between kind of initiatives that seek to increase understanding and awareness and initiatives that seek to foster kind of community and maybe kind of uplift and empower certain groups. And yeah, if you think we've kind of got the balance right with things at the moment.
Right. Yeah, I think yeah, so this question, I don't know if everyone managed to hear it, but it was kind of about getting the balance right between initiatives that support increasing awareness and understanding, and then initiatives that support like community. So I guess I do think it is a tricky thing to maintain. But that is what I believe that what the staff networks are doing are very crucial in sort of the community building part of it. And yeah, I think it is something that you're always seeking to try to maintain that balance of like, when you have events, like who is the audience? Is it like people from within that community or people from outside of that community or both? But like when it's both, you kind of need to, the content, you always need to be mindful of like how you're tailoring that content to your audience. So I do think it is a tricky thing, but like I definitely think both of those kinds of initiatives are equally important. And I, working with the staff networks, working on the resource pages, like, I am sort of like dividing my time between these two things. And that's definitely, yeah, that's a very good question and something that I think we are always thinking about and trying to work towards achieving a good balance there.
That's fantastic. I'm not sure if there's any more questions from the audience, but Cynthia, I've got one final question for you. What from a kind of like Imperial perspective, what would you like to see happen, say, over the next 5 to 10 years? How would you want the community at Imperial to respond to the various issues that we've discussed from an EDI perspective?
Yeah, I do think that pronouns thing I mentioned is really important. Like, if we could get to a point where I go into a meeting and people do introduce themselves with pronouns, I would be very happy if that happened. And yeah, hearing gender neutral language, and yeah, it is very difficult to look towards the future when we're so focused on all these issues that are happening in the present.
Yeah.
But yeah, and it's about making all these spaces more intersectional.
Yeah.
Yeah, just more voices of queer people of color at both events about BAME things and events about queer issues. It's making sure all these networks are collaborating, coming up with events together. We're all generating ideas that are intersectional.
We're looking beyond differences to see how we can collectively work together for the good of everyone.
Definitely.
Brilliant. Cynthia, it's been absolutely brilliant having you on today. Really...
Can I very briefly, because somebody did ask where they can buy my work.
Yeah.
And Sarah has linked to a tweet that is on my Twitter account, but if I just said it here as well, I have, if you go to my Twitter account, there is a link to like my WordPress website where there are links to short stories that are available to read for free online. But that anthology that I mentioned with LGBTQIA short stories and poems and illustrations as well, that is from, that's published by Stripes and it's available, you can find it, it's called Proud. The forward is by Juno Dawson. So if you search Proud Juno Dawson, you should be able to find it. And yeah, Waterstones, Amazon. Try not to buy from Amazon. But yeah, support your independent bookshops. Very passionate about that. If you have an independent bookshop near you, buy from there. Hive.co.uk. You can support independent bookshops that way.
Brilliant. That's fantastic. I was meant to ask you that same question where we could. I've missed a trick. I should have asked you to come and read something as well. So I'm going to have to bring you back on now, and we can have a book reading. So when you get
one day when my book is published.
That's right. That's what I was going to say. When your book is published, right? We'll have a book reading session there, and we can go through the nuances of your book. All right. But Cynthia, it's been absolutely brilliant having you on this week. I'm going to just let people know what's going to be happening next week. So next week, we're going to have Leon McFarlane, who is a senior research technician at Imperial College, who's been very actively working with he's been actively working on the vaccine with Professor Shattuck. So it's going to be a really interesting discussion next week. And the other thing, if you've missed any of the Belonging series, you can always find it on our YouTube site, which is tinyurl.com, belonging hyphen IOA. So until next week, thank you very much for joining us. And again, come next week, 12:30, same time, same place. Thank you very much. Take care. Bye-bye.